how to live, like the name, I titled the show, How to Live to 100, in honor of my grandmother. And check this out. My grandmother retired a little bit after 70 years old and then moved from Chicago back to Mississippi to work her land. Let me say it again. Retired and moved from Chicago back to Mississippi to work her land. So every day, I remember going down there, you know, she had her fields and all her vegetables and stuff growing. She was getting up every day and going out there and working her land. One, getting grounded, right? Which is a lot of us don't even know about that. Like getting grounded, like actually connecting with the earth and how that heals the body. I'll spend some time on that, at a different time. Here's the other piece. I was in Home Depot Thursday night, and I was going in there to grab a piece, an electrical piece. And as I was walking to the cash register, I walked past a former classmate of mine who was in the, what do you call the cart, the automatic cart that you drive? She was in the automatic cart that you drive. And I recognized her in the face. I would have never recognized her in the body. Now, mind you, I'm 47 years old. And this classmate of mine is driving around in this cart. And how it occurred to me is that she did not have the well-being or the wherewithal to comfortably walk to what she needed to get in Home Depot. And it really hit me, number one, how blessed I have been with knowledge. That's the first piece. Part of the reason I make my health and well-being a priority is because I understand what happens when you don't. There's knowledge there. What kind of life do you want to live? Like holistically. Like who do you intend to be? But I think more importantly, how do you want to be remembered upon your death? Like how do you want people to remember you? And all of that has to do with the action you take now.
If you want to be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live your dream. Your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals.
This morning topic, like what I want to talk about, is my grandmother. Let me put it in context. My grandmother passed away 2 Sundays ago, April 21st, 2024. And I know some of you are like, how do we not know about this? You know, there's a whole lot that happens in my life that I don't talk about. I promise you. Right? And the reason I want to talk about her is because she lived to be 103 years old. 103. I don't know about you guys. I think that's significant. And I sat back and I was thinking about my grandmother's life. And yesterday we had her funeral. And I had the opportunity to speak and talk about some of my experiences with my grandmother, who we call Big Ma, by the way. I don't think I knew my grandmother's full name until I was probably 30-something years old, right? Because everybody called her Big Ma. And I was thinking about her life, and after after the funeral, I was headed to the repast, and I had audio that I'm going to play today, by the way, on my phone of a conversation that I had with my grandmother when she was 90. We were driving. I went to go pick her up. I think, no, this time there's two different pieces of audio that I have that I'm going to play today. And one piece of that audio was me taking her back home from my sister's graduation. And in this one, she was just giving me family history. I'm going to play a snippet of that. Because my grandmother was born in 1920, to put it in perspective, like 1920. Now, here's the thing. I want to give you context about 1920 in a moment, because I think sometimes, we'll, like what was going on in 1920. And I also think that there's some things that we forget, like that we've gone through, that our loved ones have gone through, that our ancestors have gone through. Like, we forget. And I also want to just remind us, especially for those of us in the so-called black community, of what we've gone through. And it's another reason why we should remind our young people, because we have it much better. And in many ways, they've got it. I'm not going to say great, but they got it good. Okay? They got it good. There's still a whole lot of ground that we can take, but they have it good. So, and I want to share a few stories. And let me give some context on why I'm doing this. And partly, some of it's selfish, right? And selfish in that, for my children, like, they won't really remember her. And I think that this verbal history is incredibly important, and especially because we can document it. And like, what even prompted me to do this was the verbal history I have that I recorded of my grandmother back when she was 90 years old. My grandmother was born in Etta, Mississippi. All right. And for any of our grandparents, great-grandparents that were living in the early 1900s, part of what they experienced just by being alive was significant social, cultural, and political change throughout their lives. I mean, a lot. I think sometimes we feel like we're going through a lot, right? Oh, I'm going through so much. We going through so much. Our community is going through so much. And when we look back at members of our community, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and what they had to endure, I think it puts it in perspective. In a lot of ways, I think we're lazy, man. Not only lazy, but we're also a bit entitled based on the work that they've done. And I'll put this in perspective as we chat, but my grandmother was born into the Jim Crow South. And when she was born, everything was segregated. I'll play some audio in a moment where she talks about how segregated it was in Chicago when she got here in 1960. Like, and one of the things what she told me is there used to be a curtain on the train, right, where white folks sat in one area and then they would pull a curtain. So they didn't have to look at us, pull a curtain, and the black folks sat in another area. By the way, if you're listening and you actually remember that and you can explain that, like you experienced it, not that you heard about it, because I heard about it too and I can talk about it, right? You experienced it. Give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. Like here in Chicago, like the trains having curtains and like white folks sitting, towards the front of the train or in a particular part of the train. And this is in the north in Chicago, right? And I know they had that going on trains that went from Mississippi to Chicago. Like, I already know that. But I was surprised when she shared that. And you'll hear the audio later. She was like, oh, yeah, I got up here. It's just as segregated as it was in Mississippi. Wasn't no different for her. So she experienced a lot of those changes, but she grew up in the Jim Crow South. Enforced racial segregation the intentional disenfranchisement of African Americans or so-called black people, and severe economic hardship. Let me put that in perspective. Like severe. Like, because, we go through hardships now. And I'm not minimizing anybody's experience. But I think sometimes we don't understand how bad it was. Like severe economic hardship and very limited educational opportunity. My mother, who was the youngest of 8 from my grandmother, this is on my mother's side, she, I believe, might have been, her and my aunt, Norma, may have been the only ones who ever finished high school. Like, you get where I'm going? That's not weird. That's not weird for that time frame. Like the only ones who finished high school. So when I say like limited educational opportunities, like there were limited educational opportunities. My uncles, only one is alive now, my Uncle Joe. But my uncles, none of them finished high school. Like the family couldn't survive if they went to school. You get where I'm going? Like they had to be in the fields working or doing what it was that they could do to bring value to the family in order for the family to be able to shelter themselves and eat. So when I say like severe, right? Severe economic hardship, that's what I mean. And I know a lot of you all, especially for the mature listeners on WVON, like I'm sure you're shaking your heads right now going, yeah, this is the reality of how it was back then. So these are the things that my grandmother experienced in her early life. The other thing that she experienced was the Great Depression. So, and again, for context, my grandmother was about, between the age of 17 and 20 during that period of the Great Depression, like when it hit and when it like really. Now, and here's the thing, like I asked my grandmother about the Great Depression. I said, what do you remember? Like, was it significant to you? And she was like, when you're broke already, everybody else losing money don't have that much of an impact on you. She said, what I do remember is a lot of rich white folk who all of a sudden didn't have anything and were trying to figure it out. And that was surprising and shocking because part of the belief for black folk in her time was like, you got it made. So then to see them suffering and struggling, it was kind of like, woo, things must be real bad. But she experienced the Great Depression. And part of what she accredited to surviving it was how tightly knit the black community in Mississippi was. And let's just sit with that for a minute. Like how tightly knit. So when economic depression hit, although they were all struggling already, part of the reason they didn't suffer any greater than what they could have suffered was how they all came together. And I think one of the big differences is, too, my grandmother was the oldest of 13 children. And so you got a lot of brothers and sisters, a lot of nieces and nephews, and everybody's going out, figuring out how to make sure the family is taken care of. Now, my grandmother and my uncles, before they came up to Chicago, were sharecroppers. And one of the things that we don't talk about, and I don't know that there's a book on this, but one of the things that we don't talk about often is the level of trauma that sharecropping created in our communities. Like we talk about slavery, right? And a lot of times, we kind of mark slavery as ended 1863, Juneteenth, that happened a couple of years later. And we're like, slavery was over. But in many ways, what happened in the South, and, from from what my grandmother shared, is that things moved from slavery to an economic slavery of sharecropping, where the white landowners still exacted a lot of the ills of slavery on the black sharecroppers. From rape, like all that was still going on. And I think sometimes we 1863, 1860, all that changed. And here's the reason I'm sharing it. Some of us may look at our families, and by the way, my family, we're blessed. I think phenomenal family. And we have trauma. And, for any members of my family who were listening last night, a few of us went to my cousin's house, and we were just kind of remembering Big Ma. And some of that trauma came up in terms of experiences we've had with our parents, disappointment, etc. I mean, the conversation was flowing, man. And of course, you add, a little drink to that, and the conversation really gets to flowing, right? And the conversation was flowing. And there was multiple times where I had to remind, one of my cousins, like, yo, you got to remember that things were, things were very different back then. And the level of trauma that our grandmother experienced, the level of trauma that was passed on to our parents, to our mothers, was significant. And it would be completely unfair to hold them to the same level that we hold ourselves today, right? And I also think it's one of the reasons why it's so important that we all explore our trauma through therapy, because epigenetics is real. If you don't know what epigenetics is the passing down of trauma through the DNA, right? The passing down of significant trauma through the DNA. Let me tell you one story I've heard verbally over and over about my family. So one of the reasons that we migrated, like my grandmother migrated to Chicago, was economic, no doubt, right? There were more economic opportunity. But the other was because after a dispute with the sharecropper that they were working for, she had to leave. She had to leave because the sharecropper shot my uncle in the back of the head with a shotgun. He survived it. Now, he shot my uncle in the back of the head with a shotgun because my uncle was defending his sister from the sharecropper's son. So again, the same thing, right? Like the sharecropper's son, quote unquote, can do whatever he wants to do on the land, right? And when my uncle was defending his sister on the sharecropper's land, the sharecropper felt like he had every right to take out his shotgun, right, hunt my uncle down, and shoot him. And the way the story goes, there was my uncle defending. And so think about that trauma too. Like, my aunt going through that experience, uncle stepping in, then later seeing your brother shot as a result of him defending you. You get where I'm going? Like, it's a lot. That's a lot. My uncle later in Chicago, after living for quite some time with a piece of shrapnel in the back of his skull, would die due to, those injuries. He had brain stuff going on, and eventually he passed away when I was I think I was a preteen about that time when he passed away. And it's funny, as a preteen, I really did, I know he had some stuff going on with his brain. I had no idea, but it all linked back to shrapnel being in parts of his skull, and as you know, metal in the brain, we know what can happen with that, right? But at the time, from what I understand, my grandmother was going back and forth to Chicago to make money. And she's going back and forth to Chicago to make money. And when she realized that her family, right, couldn't stay in Mississippi anymore, they leave overnight and drive to Chicago to make Chicago home. This is in 1960. And I just want you to think about how it happens, because sometimes when we think about the Great Migration, right, in 1960 was the second wave of individuals moving from the South to the North. And sometimes when we think about the Great Migration, I think we might romanticize it. Like, oh, well, our people, my grandmother, my grandfather and them, they moved to the North for more opportunity. And we imagine them, packing up and saying, goodbye, everyone, and people waving, and then them getting on the road to go north. And just know I don't believe it was just my family, but a lot of our folks were driving out at night, because they had to escape the wrath and the violence of the white people of their communities. And just sit with that. That's a big deal. As a matter of fact, and I have this in the audio, my grandmother is talking about my sister's graduation. And at the time, again, she's 90 years old. I'm taking her home. And I'm using this as context because I'm taking her home. And she was like, that was something. I said, what, the graduation? She said, yeah, that was something. And I thought she was talking about my sister walking the stage, the education. And I said, well, what about it did you, think, was significant? And she was like, the way we walked in there and sat in the middle of all them white people. I let that sit, just let that, because a lot of us do that all the time now, right? But this is a woman who came from the Jim Crow South, who, is very, very familiar with racism at its height, experiencing racism. And then now here we are in Chicago, that was also segregated, and she talks about it. Here we are in Chicago, and we had a graduation, and we just walk in and sit right in the middle of all these white folks. Like that, ain't this something? Like how significantly things have changed in her lifetime. 103 years. So the first piece of audio that I want to play and here's what happened to give you all some context. So my grandmother and I would, I would have these opportunities to spend time with her, driving her different places. And because, she lost her license, I think about 90. It was about, 80, 89. And before that, she was very, very, very self-sufficient. As a matter of fact, I remember driving with her when I was a child, and she would drive really slow. Like, Big Mom, why you drive so slow? And she would say, well, she has something about going slow and smooth that gets you there just as quickly as everybody else. And she says, watch what I mean. And I remember this. We were sitting at a red light. I was sitting in the front. My brother was in the back. And we're sitting at a red light. I believe it was a red light on Garfield Boulevard. And the light turns green. All the cars, shoo, they all take off. And she real nice and slow and easy. We just rolling. She had a Cutlass, a Buick Cutlass. We just rolling. And everybody gets to the next red light. And then here we go. She probably going 30 miles an hour. We just creep up to the red light right next to him. She said, you see what I mean, baby? She's like, you don't got to go as fast as everybody else to get where they going to at the same time. She said, ain't nobody going nowhere. I'm right here with them. And then the next light turn green, everybody, boom, take off. And she just be doing the same thing up the street, right? And she like, they ain't went nowhere. You see that car, he ain't went nowhere. You know, you just wasting all that gas. And I remember that. And after a while, it's got comfortable how she drove. I'm like, all right, this is how big my drive. You know, we get there just as quickly as everybody else. And there's a lot of metaphors in that story. A whole lot of metaphors in that story. Okay. So this is my grandmother talking about, actually, I think I got it queued up already. My grandmother talking about Chicago history. No, that's not the one I want to play. I wanted her talking about, because the other thing we talked about was Dr. King. I don't know, and again, my grandmother was 103, so she had a lot of perspective. But I was talking to my grandmother one day, and I was asking her about Dr. King, and I had what I wanted her to say, right? I wanted her to say, yes, I was, I was out there with them. I was all for Dr. King and everything that, he stood for and everything that he did. And I remember asking her about it. I'm going to let you all hear her response. And I was just kind of like, oh, I guess that's, that's the real response. Like, she was like, no, I had a family. I couldn't be out there messing around. And that's kind of how she said it, messing around the same way a lot of other people were out there messing around. So this the first track is on Grandma and how my mother got her name. And I want to share this. People may agree or disagree with what I'm about to say about naming. But I do think that it's important context. So listen to this audio real quick, and then I'll discuss my thoughts on naming children after this. But listen to it very carefully. I've actually had people ask, why doesn't your daughter carry your mother's name at all? And this is going to explain. I'll give context, but this will explain why. So let's put it up here.
See, I was born in 1920.
So your parents got married in 1922?
Yeah, they got married in 1920.
Where they get married at?
No, they got married in 1921, and Mildred was born in 1922, June 16th.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a sister there.
So Mildred is not my mother. The Mildred she's talking about in this particular clip is my mother's aunt. My mother's aunt. I'll keep it going. Name Mildred?
Her name Mildred. That's where your mama got her name from.
Okay.
And your daddy's had a sister that growing up. At least I mean her dad. And her name was Bernice.
Okay. And my mother's father had a sister that got burnt up in a fire. And her name was Bernice. Okay? So my mother's name is Mildred Bernice after two of her aunts, right? Both of which passed away horribly. Because getting burnt up in the fire, that's horrible, right? A little bit more. Okay.
And so they named her Mildred Bernice.
After both of her aunts on both sides.
Yeah. That's what her name's after.
Okay.
Hey, you get to be home?
Yeah, go to the garage. Okay. So in this case, I was bringing my grandmother home to my house. And so we go in the garage. I'm going to tell a little bit more of that story. Now, here's what I mean about naming. Mildred, if you look up the definition of the name, is a name that is given to middle class or women who are middle class workers, in particular women who worked at the mill. The name Mildred, right? So the name Mildred really means to mill, right? To mill. Now, the name Bernice has a different definition. Now, neither of these definitions are powerful. And in both cases, both of my great aunts, Mildred and Bernice, died incredibly violent deaths. My mother, who didn't die a violent death, died young as well. So when I thought about my daughter, and I'm sharing this with you all, okay, because I really want us, there is context and power in naming. And for me, I love my mother to death. I think you all know that. But I also saw that it was time to end that era. Like completely end that era. And so I did not want my daughter to carry the name of what we name middle class women. Right? I didn't want her to carry that name. I didn't want her to carry Bernice, of a woman who burned alive, nor did I want her to carry the name of Mildred or Millie, because it was referred to women who were middle class. My mother was middle class her entire life. And as much as I helped her financially, that's just, that's as far as she went. And she had aspirations to do more, but sometimes I wonder about the power of a name. All right? And so for me, I don't take chances. That's why my son's name is Legend and my daughter's name is Rain, Reign. And I just want to share that for context, because my grandmother is a huge part of me, and learning these stories from her influence how I think about things. So that's the first piece. That's the first piece. And in terms of what I believe about naming, the reason why my daughter doesn't carry the name, I'll encourage my children not to name their children after my mother or their great aunt, for those reasons, right? We'll always remember them, but the idea is that we won't use that name. Another reason I want to have this show, so we have verbal documentation of that, okay? I want to share this last piece of audio I have of my grandmother talking about Chicago history, and play that now.
They was marching, they hit him. Those rock or something, they hit him upside the head.
And right here, it picks up with her talking about the marching, and this is in Chicago in particular, and she's saying how the people who were marching, and she's talking about someone she knew in particular who, as he was marching, he got hit upside the head, split his head open. So she's just giving me her, for real, live account of her experience during the civil rights movement here in Chicago. Huh. You ever go out there and march with him?
No.
No? Why not?
I didn't care. I don't care about them marching, but I wasn't for them taking chances on my life.
I hear that.
I had a bad one.
Yeah. You remember it all, huh? Mm-hmm. That's back when the original mayor was around here, right? Oh. Now listen to this carefully. So I asked her, that's back when the original mayor was around here. Now mind you, this is 2010. So my grandmother was 90 years old. This is 2010, where we're driving and I'm interviewing her. By the way, this is something my grandmother and I did often. I say, Big Ma, I'm going to turn on my recorder and I want you to share some family history with me. And then she loved it. We'd be riding around and she'd get to talking, and I ask her questions. And this is how we spent our time. And here, she tells me a story about the first Mayor Daley. Now, check this out. There's a lesson to learn here. Check this out. What she talks about the first Mayor Daley and how we felt about Mayor Daley back then.
Mayor Daley?
Mayor Daley, right.
Yeah. I know the day the Mayor Daley died.
How people feel about him, black folks?
Oh, they love Mayor Daley.
They love Mayor Daley.
They would give shopping bags out with $1 in there.
And then she goes on to say, Mayor Daley used to give, I'm going to play it again, he used to give shopping bags out with $1 in them that said, vote for me. And my grandmother laughs as she says, that's the reason black folks loved him. They thought they was getting some money. Hold on. I'm going to replay it and let you all hear this contextually, okay? They thought they was getting some money.
They
did?
Man, they would give shopping bags out with $1 in there for him to vote for him.
Really?
Yeah. See, he give shopping bags out like, and inside that shopping bag, he have $1 in there.
Wow.
And people thought they was getting some money. Yeah, everybody vote for him.
Everybody vote for him. Now, fast forward to 2024. How has it changed? How has it changed? They might not be putting dollar bills in shopping bags, but I can guarantee you they're promising you stuff you'll never see. Okay, let me finish this up. Wow. Now, he wasn't the nicest guy to black folks, though, was he?
Well, I ain't know nothing against it. I had nothing against it.
No.
Nobody liked him, look like. When he died, you see who got in, his son.
Yeah, after they get, after Harold Washington died.
Do you remember Harold Washington?
Oh, yeah, I remember Harold Washington. Keep coming across, buddy. Okay. Martin Luther King. So you came to Chicago in 1960, and he was in Chicago when he came here and lived here for a while?
I don't know. But I had been here for a while when that happened. Yeah, he lived. I didn't know where he was living at, what street he was on. So she knew where he was living at, what street he was on? Isn't that interesting? And by the way, she goes on to talk about how a lot of folks didn't necessarily agree. You had people who agreed, people who disagreed. And I find it fascinating that we'll often romanticize change makers after they've done their work and after they die. But when change makers show up in our lives in the moment, we ain't always that keen or fond of them. I find it very fascinating. I'll play a little bit more. How black folks feel about Martin Luther King back then? Oh, they loved him.
Loved him.
Mm-hmm.
He made some definite moves, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he made things like it is today. Otherwise, what would have become of the black people?
Otherwise, what would have become of the black people? There's a lot of ways to think about that. What has become of us? Like, I wonder, when my grandmother passed, her mind wasn't clear. And her mind wasn't clear probably for the last 5 years or so. And it kind of put it in context. Often when I would go see her, she would call me Paul. And Paul is my grandfather. And so she would say, Paul, where you been? Why you ain't come see me? I said, Big Ma, this Linnell. Paul, you always lying. I said, oh, boy, what'd my grandfather do? Paul, you always lying. Why you be lying, Paul? You ain't been here. What are you talking about? And I had to, Big Ma, it's me, Linnell. I'm like, and then, sometimes she'd come to and say, woo, you look like Paul. Woo, you look like Simmons. That was his last name, Paul Simmons. Woo, you look like Simmons, right? Which I do. And look at pictures and I, man, but that's my granddaddy. Nonetheless, her mind wasn't clear. But sometimes I wonder if she could see the state of our community clearly before she passed, what her thoughts would have been. If she would have felt like we had made the progress that she hoped, and that, even when you think about it, when she was 90 years old, right, 13 years before, think about how fast things changed from 2010 to now. And where is the black community?
for our grandparents who've passed on, who endured what my grandmother endured, like, would they be proud of the work that we're doing? Would they be proud of us and how we're showing up in life? Would they be maybe a little disappointed if they saw how you were moving in your life today, how your children were moving, what they were up to? Would they in any, like, you know, when you think about what they went through, when I think about what my big mom went through, the sacrifices she made, some of them I can't even mention on the radio. Like, just to make sure that her children survived. Like, would she be proud and say it was worth it? Or would she say, my goodness, I gave all this for what? And I think that's something for us to think about. And I wanted to spend some time remembering my grandmother today, who, saw the civil rights movement firsthand, and who also was born in 1920 and had the opportunity to live for over 100 years. And I believe her story is a powerful testimony of resilience in the face of what is real adversity. I think some of us, what we're facing is more self-created adversity versus actual racial, economic adversity and change. And as a centurion, I believe her life encapsulated the full arc of American history through what is the 20th century and now the 21st century. So in the first audio clip, you heard me driving into the garage. And I was pulled into the garage. In my backyard, at that particular house, I had a pear tree. My grandmother comes out. She sees all the pears. Her eyes light up, man. She's like, you got a pear? Why you ain't never say you had a pear tree? To her, that was significant. And the reason it was significant is because my grandmother was very clear that there was real food and fake food. And she used to say this all the time, right? So I don't know what y'all young folks are eating, but it's not real food. And she would refuse it, no matter how good it smelled. I can remember one particular time, this is back when I was eating chicken. And we were all at my mother's house. My grandmother was there, my siblings, and we ordered KFC. We got a bucket of KFC, bucket of chicken. So we got this bucket of chicken. We got all the fixings and sides, and my grandmother's there. She's sitting at the table, and everybody's getting chicken out the bucket, right? And I say, Big Ma, why you not eating? And she said, eating what? And I said, chicken. And she said, that ain't no chicken. I kid you not. She said, chicken don't smell like that. Now, this is a woman that was born in 1920 that defeathered, defeathered a chicken herself, chopped the head off, gutted it. She would, once she got it all cleaned up and stuff, she would then take it and put it in a pot and pour buttermilk in it, soak it in buttermilk, and then bake that chicken, take it back, cut it up, fry it. This is a woman who knew how to make chicken and knew what a real chicken looked like. And she looked at that bucket and said, that ain't chicken y'all eat. Anyway, we walk out the garage. She see these pears. We go inside the house. She said, hey, baby, go get me a bowl and a knife. I said, okay, Big Ma, what you about to do? She said, I'm about to go out here and get these pears off this tree. That's some good eating. And so she grabs the bowl and she pulls down. She fills it's a big bowl, fills the entire bowl with pears. We go back in the house. She put the pears in the sink, clean them off, chop the heads off, the top of them off, and then went out there. We sat on the patio on the porch, and while we were talking, she had that knife and ate the whole bowl of pears, man. I helped her with a few. She ate the most. Ate the whole bowl of pears. And you wonder why she lived to 103? Now, you try to offer even a child a pear, and they'll frown up at it. We have been so manipulated and so programmed that most of us will reject real food for fake food. How to live, like the name, I titled the show How to Live to 100 in honor of my grandmother. And check this out. My grandmother retired a little bit after 70 years old and then moved from Chicago back to Mississippi to work her land. Let me say it again. Retired and moved from Chicago back to Mississippi to work her land. So every day, I remember going down there, you know, she had her fields and all her vegetables and stuff growing. She was getting up every day and going out there and working her land. One, getting grounded, right? Which is a lot of us don't even know about that. Like getting grounded, like actually connecting with the earth and how that heals the body. I'll spend some time on that, at a different time. But just getting grounded and touching the earth actually heals the body, right? Like we were designed to be connected to the earth. Most of us now would be like, oh, the dirt, oh, it's like, where do you think you're going eventually? Right back to the dirt, right with the bugs that you're so afraid of. They're going to be crawling through you at some point, all right? This is the kind of stuff I say. My wife would be like, really, Linnell, did you have to say all that? It's like, but it's the truth. I think sometimes, going back to what I talked about a week ago, the denial of death, but we also, because we deny death, are going there faster. Here's the other piece. I was in Home Depot Thursday night, and I was going in there to grab a piece, an electrical piece, and as I was walking to the cash register, I walked past a former classmate of mine who was in the, what do you call the cart, the automatic cart that you drive? She was in the automatic cart that you drive. And I recognized her in the face. I would have never recognized her in the body. Now, mind you, I'm 47 years old. And this classmate of mine is driving around in this cart. And how it occurred to me is that she did not have the well-being or the wherewithal to comfortably walk to what she needed to get in Home Depot. And it really hit me, number one, how blessed I have been with knowledge. That's the first piece. Part of the reason I make my health and well-being a priority is because I understand what happens when you don't. There's knowledge there. I understand what happens when you don't. And I began thinking like, she's 47 too, 47, 48. If she wanted to reverse what was going on for her, could she? And I thought at this point she probably could. Well, then I thought about the amount of work she would have to do just to be able to move and walk like me. And most of us, we aren't willing to do the work because it has to be an internal vision. I can't give the vision. Like she would have to have that vision, and why? At 47 years old, if she can barely walk, even if she lives to 60, 65, how pleasant is life going to be? And many of us are setting ourselves up for our own demise. And when things get really bad, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. When things get really bad, we start to put in prayer requests. And it's like, well, will prayer fix it though? Because you did that. You did that. And the universal laws, the laws that the Creator put in place, I was having this conversation with my father-in-law, and he had a rebuttal that I can appreciate. And he has some wisdom that I'm like, okay, I need to be tapping into. But he had a rebuttal that I appreciate. But when you think about the laws that were put in place, like you reap what you sow. My father-in-law's rebuttal was like, that's the beauty of the blood of Christ, that some things you don't deserve and you can get. But then I'm like, my rebuttal to that is, that requires a deep level of faith, either from who's praying for you, or from you yourself. And then the question is, do you even got that? What kind of life do you want to live? Like holistically. Like who do you intend to be? But I think more importantly, how do you want to be remembered upon your death? Like, how do you want people to remember you? And all of that has to do with the action you take now. The action you take now. Again, open Q&A, 591-1690, 773-591-1690. So anyway, I that really shook me when I saw my former classmate in the little buggy. Like, it just shook me. I'm like, man, 47 and not walking, like not able to walk well. Like that should shake you. But what happens is we live in a society now where everything is excused. Everything's okay. I'll be called a fat shamer, or like what happens is the individuals who want to hold us accountable, we figured out we now are going after them. And it's a trick, folks. It's a trick. There are certain fundamentals to living that will always be true. I don't care who they hire to write differently. I don't care what they have behind their name or what titles they have. Like, there are certain fundamental common sense things that we know that we got to stop letting people tell us otherwise, period.
I'll leave you with that, brother.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Art.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So in order, like when I think about family, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the man. Because the man is the creator of the family. Now, let me put some context to that before the ladies come after me, right? But the reason I say the man is the creator of the family is because that man has to choose to commit to that woman so there can be a family. And because the kind of family that I hear you talking about is a nuclear family, Art.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things, and by the way, this is not shaming anybody, but one of the things that the data says is that children that grow up outside of a nuclear family do not have the same social, emotional outcomes and health as children that do. Children that grow up in balance, right? Balance between the masculine, the feminine, etc., right? And this is just the data, you all. So, don't come for me. You got to go for the facts. You got to go for the data, okay? Now, Art, to that point, only 32% of black men in the United States are currently married. Let that sink in. This is according to the latest U.S. Census Bureau data. Only 32% of the black men in the United States are currently married. And so how do we begin to get underneath this issue of family with the current state of black men?
That's because, Brother Linnell, you and many of us have a responsibility to come up with a universal community code of conduct in the family value system that all institutions in our community is teaching. That means no matter where I go, I'm going to pick up the same literature. And we have to open our churches and mosques and decide that our mission is going to be to rebuild and re-strengthen the black community, which is the black family. And until we make that fundamental decision and stand on it and realize that the broken family is what's causing the greatest problem in our community, we're not going to move forward. All the wealth in the world, you know it. We got men and women that's wealthy, but you see the breakdown of their family because there's no family structure.
Yeah.
And the man is the head. Men and women are both equal. So each of us play a very, very important part. You can't have one without the others. You cannot have that. But I end with that. But I am glad that you are, expanding your teaching and getting right into the family. May God continue to bless. And I end with, and what now, black people.
Got you. Thanks for that, Art. Hey, and by the way, the question I asked Art, that is in contrast. That is in contrast to 64% of black men being married back when my grandmother was a young woman. That's in contrast. So it's dropped by half. It is dropped by half. Whew, man. Like, and by the way, for the sisters who are like, and the ones who are married, they're not married to us. 70% of that 32% that are married to black women. So 70% of them got a black woman. Right? So a lot of times they be like, man, it's like not overwhelmingly. Most of us are with y'all.
I wanted to say thank you for the information about your grandmother. Mm-hmm. It made me think about the relationship that I'm having with my dad right now, a person that I really didn't know, but now I'm having to take care of him at 83 years old. So you were asking, did people have any questions? So I have two.
Okay.
One is that if someone is taking care of their dad, they don't really know their dad, and they're listening to, all the things that happened to him as he grew up, how do you deal with all that negativity that that happened to him?
Yeah. So here's the first piece, and this is why I think family history is really important. Consider that everything that happened to him happened to you. That's the first one, right? Because that trauma has been passed down through the DNA, epigenetically. That trauma has been passed down through your interactions or lack of interaction, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so as you begin to gain that knowledge, and consider that it's a gift to be with him now because he gets to teach you about you.
I believe that, O'Neill. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The other thing is that I'm here in Northeast California. I haven't called you in a long time. I remember the last time I called you. But we have a community garden that practically the food is for free. And believe it or not, hardly anyone comes. I mean, we got collard greens, mustard greens, chard, all these vegetables. And the guy that runs the garden, he says I'm his best customer because I'm there like once a week. But it's probably about myself and about 3 or 4 other families that come there when really we should have a lot more. But nobody wants to eat vegetables, like you said, How do I get people to come there? I mean, I'm always asking. Yeah. Oh, I'll be there, but they never come.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it. When I grew up going to church, I remember being a child, and the preachers would be like, if you don't give your life to God, you're going to hell. And it would scare the hell out of you, right? And it's the fear. They use fear as a tactic to create transformation, which, by the way, is not sustainable. Because, the fear, you don't feel as afraid on Wednesday, so then you don't live right. you know what I'm saying? Right. It's not sustainable. Everybody has to have a personal vision. But I do think it's an introductory.
I don't believe that we're having enough real conversations about health anymore. And if this is something you're doing, one, I would say we need individuals like you, Tracy, to become influencers. Believe it or not, a lot of young people don't even know how to cook this food.
I know. Nobody wants to eat red beans. I love red beans. Yeah. And no one wants to, they
don't know
that.
how to cook the
I'd rather
food.
go to Red Lobster.
Yeah, they don't know how to make the food tasty. The art of cooking is an art that is dying. Well, I mean, you really think about it. And if there are any young people who are listening, like, it is imperative that you learn how to cook. Like, imperative. But also, here's the other thing. Consider reaching out to some of the groups in your community. I'm sure there are groups, the Urban League, different groups who may have individuals that can help you activate and also bring more awareness to the fact that you all are giving away good organic food, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that. I would say, whenever you notice that you can't do it alone, this is when you want to partner and unify. So are there groups in your community that you can reach out to where you can say, hey, this is something we have. Can you help me activate this? Is the best advice I can give you. Thank you for what you're doing.
And the other thing, Linnell, I wanted to say is that my dad came here to Northeast California in the 50s. And then on my mom's side, they came from Louisiana. And then on my mom's side, they came here from Louisiana in the 30s. And I'm like, why did they come here? But I can understand because what you were saying, maybe they were running away from something.
They were running.
Think that they were going to, that they were going to get something better, have a better life.
Well, consider how they were living, Tracy. Anything was better.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have a whole lot. You don't have a whole lot anyway, right? And by the way, a lot of our grandparents and aunts and uncles undervalued the land they were on. Mm-hmm. And so they were willing to leave all of that or even sell all of that, for pennies on the dollar, man, when you really think about it, right? And how much that land is worth now, like the acres are worth now. And escape the ills that they were facing. Like I said, potential sexual abuse, nothing had changed.
Yeah.
I mean, these sharecropping landowners, they felt like they had the same rights to us that they had 100 years ago. So not a lot had changed. If you have access to the elders in your family, and by the way, we could be secretive. We could be real secretive, man, in terms of how we move, how we do things, and our loved ones can be secretive too. Part of it is because of the shame of what it took to survive, right? There's some things that, by the way, nothing but respect for my grandmother, Big Mom. But I know there's some things she had to do that she was ashamed of. In order to keep that family together and take care of it, I know there are some things that she had to do to survive that South that she was ashamed of. And that's the piece that if we can slowly, one of the reasons I was having conversations with my grandmother is to begin to understand better, like what was going on, what was happening. And how might that impact me, and how might that impact the generations after us in terms of how we heal it and stop it so we can build on the platform that they provided us. So, great work, Tracy. Thank you for all that you're doing.
But I wanted to say how special it was that you had insight to record your grandmother.
Yeah,
I toyed with doing that with my uncle, and I didn't, and he's gone. So
yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
And
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, because somebody had a business doing it. And I said, well, I could do it myself. But they had it all, structured and would have some specific questions that they researched that they know you would want the answer to once they're gone.
Right.
As opposed to a conversation. But a conversation is gold when they're gone.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's funny. It's like, okay, Art, it's like everything's about the family. It's like, how is food about the family? But you know why food is about the family? Because all the nasty stuff that's good for you that you learn to eat, that you found out as an adult when your taste buds changed, that's not really nasty, it just was when you were a child, you got introduced to through the family.
Let me tell you this. That's so true, Susan. And I was telling a story at my grandmother's funeral yesterday about how she taught my brother and I to eat okra. So we were
about okra.
Yeah, we were little boys, and she had cooked dinner for us. And we used to go over there after church on Sundays, and she had cooked dinner for us, and she had a whole plate of okra on the table, and we were like, absolutely not, right? Because we had never seen it before, right? We had never seen, whole okra, like that before, and it was my grandmother that taught me how to eat okra. And when I say taught me, she basically manipulated us into liking it. And how she did it was she took it, and she just slurped it in real fast. And she said, you see how fast that's gone? And it turned into a game.
She didn't let you see the goo.
Yeah. And we never saw the goo. She never cut it open. You know what I'm saying? And it was her that taught us that okra could be good. And to this day, we eat okra because of my grandmother. And so to that point, that family is huge. And one of the things, I was having this conversation with my wife, Susan, that one of the things that has happened is that our families have become separated and segmented. And even if we all live in Chicago, one is on the south side, the other's on the west side, somebody's up north, and we're all separated and segmented. And as a result, we're living individually for most of our lives. Yeah. And we're not able to really benefit from the wisdom of our elders, the wisdom of our siblings, and how they're doing things in their families like my grandmother's people did. And I think
that you find forth. Yeah. Usually on Sunday, at least on Sundays for dinner, going over there and eating, grandma's food.
That's right.
On Sunday.
That's right.
Yeah. On social media, somebody made a question the other day. They said, what foods did you not like when you were a child that you can't get enough of now? And, everybody gave their list. And the lady said beans and corn and okra. And I said, I'm still not with okra. But I'm going to try what your grandmother did with
Try to slurp it real fast so that way it's not slimy. Like, boom. Season it real good.
There you go.
Little lemon pepper seasoning over there, it's just
yeah.
And lightly cook it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. And it's funny because I went out on a date. We were the last people there. Restaurant's about to close. They squeezed us in. Everything they offered that was regular, I was like, I don't want that. So I got a salad, and I said, look, I'm not doing this being dainty. I'm just like, I don't like anything that they have left.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, we only have blue cheese left. And I was like, blue cheese? I was like, something about blue cheese. And I was like, okay, well, give it to me because I'm hungry. I do want to eat. So I'm eating a salad. In the middle of the salad, I started laughing. And I said, oh, I remember about blue cheese. I can't stand blue cheese. But I'm gobbling it up, and it was so tasty. And I said, I told the waiter, I told my date, I was like, oh, this is what I remember about blue cheese, and I can't stand it, but this salad is delicious.
There you go.
So, it's funny how that goes. Your taste buds change.
Absolutely. And you can. Here's the other thing too, Susan. And I think a lot of us need to understand this. We are in control. You can train your taste buds.
You can.
You can, if you know something is good for you and it's good for your body. You can train your taste buds to, maybe it always will be bitter. You can train your taste buds to ignore it. It's going down anyway.
Also wanted to ask, because I keep missing portions of it, what Mike was saying about doing 3 to 4 times a week.
Exercise?
Well, Well, the exercise, he had said a hot bath at a certain temperature at 104 degrees on a different show. So he's talking exercise now, or maybe he means the body.
Well, no, he said both. Here's the thing, you can do the bath, twice a week. I would say if you can't exercise, like if you're so physically, in a way where you can't, that helps to detoxify the body. I'm like,
Okay.
but if you can move, I think you should be doing both. You should be doing both. And add a little
Exercise
Epsom
can
salt
just
to
be
that
walking.
bath too. What's that?
Exercise can just be walking. Exercise doesn't necessarily mean something strenuous. You can grow yourself in that too. And don't forget, you can exercise in a chair.
But I think what he's pointing to here is sweating.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons for the hot bath. Is there is the body can expel so many toxins in your sweat. And some of us, we're avoiding sweating.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, that avoidance of sweating, I don't want to sweat my perm out. And that's a whole nother conversation. Perms is a whole nother conversation in terms of the poison that is done to our women. But, I don't want to sweat my hair out, this, that, and the other. And it's like, if you want to live, you sweat that hair out. Hey, my inspired peoples. Linnell Harris here, certified ontological coach and trainer. I'm so excited that you're watching the channel. By the way, did you know you can catch the show live at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. every Sunday morning? You can. All you have to do is go to my Facebook stream, Coach Linnell Harris, catch the stream live, or you can listen to the radio show via iHeart at WVON 1690 AM. But since you're here, if you love the content, I ask that you share it, like this particular video, and subscribe to the channel. I hope you're having a great day.